get a big inheritance or something, I'm going to try to be inspired by the pure devotees and take it with a grain of salt and not be overly elated or overly distressed, you know, and try to be equiposed, balanced. You know, we're here to learn balance. And so sometimes Prabhupada encouraged us to be kind of grave. You know, there's obviously we can really enjoy the kirtans and things like that, but you know, Prabhupada was kind of grave a lot of the time, and you know, um, not whimsical and very purposeful, and um, so keeping our emotions in check that's something that takes a while to learn, doesn't it? Um, to not react, you know, to not always say, to just comment on what we observe, and then sometimes even by commenting on it, and then we go into it deeper. Oh, it's cold. Oh, it's cold outside. Oh, yeah, it's so cold. Oh, this is horrible, or this is, you know, we can learn to tolerate a little bit of cold, a little bit of mind over matter, instead of just immediate reactions. You know, this material world has taught us just to like immediately react, just say whatever judgments on our mind, just react. So many people just saying whatever's on their mind. They don't really have a filter, and we need to have kind of a filter. The way even a dog, even a dog, if a dog has been trained a little bit, it has a little bit of a filter where it doesn't just run after the squirrel, or you know, if the owner gives it a little tug, snaps it back. So we have to think of our mind kind of as like a dog that we're trying to make it become a little more obedient. We have to kind of snap it back sometimes, and try to have a little bit of control that way, and ask Krishna to give us those skills. And it's a process. It's a training process. So it can take many times, lots of training. But the other day I saw this. You know, have you ever come close to like these little possums that maybe you're driving in the country, and the possum maybe will walk right out in front of you, and it just doesn't seem to be aware of the car at all. It's just kind of in its dull lower consciousness. And we can say that part of us has that. We have kind of that dullness, and that we're trying to kind of get rid of. But recently I had this happen. It was a spot where I always see some roadkill where these possums always cross. And so I was kind of trying to train it just a little bit, because you have to kind of sometimes drive in a way that you're encouraging the animal to behave somewhat in a way that it might learn small lessons. You know, I wasn't going to hit it, but I was driving up to it and flashing my lights and honking. And after like 5 seconds of that, being really close to it, it like snapped out of it. It's like, oh, and it ran off. But it took that long. It took, can you imagine having a car right in front of you, flashing lights and honking, and you're not aware for a few seconds? And that's what this little possum is like. And so, of course, but maybe it got trained a little bit. Maybe it now will be a little more aware. But we're just trying to become more aware. But we have kind of that possum inside of us, and we can also see that a lot of people in the material world, they're kind of covered over consciousness. You might tell them about Bhagavad Gita or some beautiful spiritual knowledge, and they might not get it right away. They might think about it when they get home. But this delayed reaction time that that the possum has. If he loses anything which is very dear to him, he does not lament. So no lamenting, no saying, "Oh, I wish it could have been this way. I wish it could have been that way." Lamenting, and it's hard. This can be very hard. You know, we've lost sometimes family members, or we have, you know, maybe we have a family member that lost a close family member to them. Maybe you have an aunt that lost a son or something like that. It's very hard. That's very hard. But if we know that we're not the soul, if we know that we're not the body, that we are the soul, there's no death for us. That this consciousness, take this consciousness with us. Consciousness is really life, and this body is just a vehicle. So yes, sometimes people leave and they go on to a different body. We have to take a different body when we leave this body. But why does one not have to lament if one loses a dear family member? Because there is no death for that soul. There's no death, and so that soul is somewhere else. But this soul is eternal. So there's no birth and no death. It's beyond all time and space, and it's very, very powerful, like atomically powerful. The soul is, and so because someone can really, if someone loses someone close to them or has something tragic, it can really affect them, for years and maybe the rest of their life. And you just want them to, that son that moved on, he would tell the mother, he would say, no, please, I want you to be happy. And so don't mourn for me and don't go deep into depression. You have to kind of snap out of it. Even if there's a chance to go deep into depression, that's when it's hardest. But we have to snap out of it and take all these spiritual lessons that we've had. And that's when we really are tested and we really take these spiritual lessons and we say, yes, Krishna, this is hard for me. This is really hard. But I know this is part of your plan. I know this is a test. And I can snap out of it. I just don't, please help me not go deeper into a bad kind of frequency or a bad pattern. Because if we have to try to keep elevating our spirituality and keep growing our spirituality. And if we get into a rut, that's dangerous. I'm sure a small rut can help you get some bhakti muscles if you can get out of it. But we don't want to keep going in and out of ruts. It's eventually the vehicle might go over if we do so many, if we spend so much time in ruts and getting out of ruts. So we have to be very, very cautious and just single-mindedly, serve Krishna in the center. What makes him happy? What is his plan? Do I need to be mired in this world? Do I need to watch so much news and if it and they're showing me graphic images, when we're sometimes scrolling or watching, we can't really control what's coming at us. So they're giving us advertisements for meat and all these things, and then they're showing us violent images and so many things, and then all of a sudden we've got 10 other things that we're worried about or concerned about, when maybe if we would have just focused on our sadhana, we could be a little more single-minded like that. So protecting ourselves and chanting early and protecting ourselves the whole day and thinking about Krishna the whole day. And you can have these really great days if you just follow the simple plans, the plan of Krishna that he's given us. Similarly, if he does not get what he desires, he's not distressed. He is transcendental in the face of all kinds of auspicious, inauspicious, and sinful activities. So he's transcending the good, the bad, and the really bad. It's like today there's something kind of inauspicious that happened. We had the solar eclipse, and the next one won't be until like 2044. But it's known to be in the Vedas. It's known to be inauspicious, and people either stay inside or they take bath and they in the Ganges, or they chant the Maha Mantra, and so it's kind of so hopefully we were a little transcendental to it, and maybe everyone else is driving to go see it or something, but we didn't need to do that. And as Rahu covers the sun, it's a little inauspicious, but that's behind us now. So of course that can only happen on the new moon. As solar eclipse can only happen on the new moon. Text 18 through 19. Who is equal to friends and enemies? Who is equiposed in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy? Who is always free from contamination, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge and engaged in devotional service, is very dear to me. Purport. A devotee is always free from all bad association. Sometimes one is praised and sometimes one is defamed. That is the nature of human society. But a devotee is always transcendental to artificial fame and infamy, distress, or happiness. He is very patient. He does not speak of anything but the topics about Krishna. Therefore, he is called silent. Silent does not mean that one should not speak. Silent means that one should not speak nonsense. One should speak only of essentials. And the most essential speech for the devotee is to speak of the Supreme Lord. He is happy in all conditions. Sometimes he may get very palatable foodstuffs, sometimes not, but he is satisfied, nor does he care for any residential facility. He may sometimes live underneath a tree, and he may sometimes live in a very palatial building. He is attracted to neither. He is called fixed because he is fixed in his determination and knowledge. We may find some repetition in the descriptions of the qualifications of a devotee, but this is just to give an illustration of the fact that a devotee must acquire all these qualifications. Without good qualifications, one cannot be a pure devotee. One who is not a devotee has no good qualification. One who wants to be recognized as a devotee should develop the good qualifications. Of course, he does not extraneously endeavor to acquire these qualifications, but engagement in Krishna consciousness and devotional service automatically helps him develop them. And Maharaj, if you'd like to speak anything on these verses, we would all love that. Just let us know. And I was going to say, so what does that mean? The satisfied wherever we go. Imagine everything got taken away from you, and you just have maybe a cave or something. How are you going to be satisfied? Are you going to be able to handle it? One person is going to be able to be fairly satisfied and think pure devotee is going to be able to be there and just be thinking, I've got Krishna. No one can take Krishna away from me. I am his. And so I'm satisfied. I know Krishna is providing me foodstuffs. I know that I've got all my needs met. So what more do I need? I don't need material possessions. Those don't make me happy. Collecting possessions like that. So as long as my needs are being met, I can practice devotional service. I can remember everything that Prabhupada and Guru taught me, and I'm going to be okay. And you can actually be quite satisfied with that mind frame. And Prabhupada says also, maybe a palatial, maybe one gets a palace. And then one can also say, well, this is very nice. I'm going to use this also for Krishna's pleasure. I'm going to use this to help propagate Krishna Katha, and I'm going to use this to worship Krishna and have kirtan and maybe build a temple in here, all these things. So fixed in his determination and knowledge. Very determined. Very determined. Text 20. He who follows this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engages himself with faith making me the supreme goal, is very, very dear to me. So Krishna is saying, Krishna has given us this devotional service path, and it's really the only path to associate with him on a personal level. And he goes on to say, and who completely engages himself with faith. So completely engaged with faith, with that strong faith, making Krishna the supreme goal, is very, very dear to me. So Krishna liberates, a demon like Putana, the witch, that tried to get, tried to poison Krishna, but acted as a mother in some way. And so he gave her complete liberation to the spiritual world. But what to speak of the devotees, the devotee who just wants to serve Krishna in pure goodness. How much must Krishna love them? And so you become, by this devotional service, Krishna becomes purchased by you. Purport. In this chapter, the religion of eternal engagement, the explanation of the process of transcendental service for approaching the Supreme Lord is given. This chapter of devotional service. This process, we're in the very last of the 12th chapter. So the Gita is divided into 3 sections, really. The first 6 chapters, the middle 6, and the last 6. And the middle 6 are considered to be the most confidential cream of the crop. So here we are at the end of the 12th chapter. This process is very dear to the Lord, and he accepts a person who is engaged in such a process. The question, who is better, one who is engaged in the path of impersonal Brahman, or one who is engaged in the personal service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was raised by Arjuna, and the Lord replied to him so explicitly that there is no doubt that devotional service to the Personality of Godhead is the best of all processes of spiritual realization. That's amazing. That's out of all the spiritual processes, hundreds, thousands, out of all of them, the Lord is specifically saying this is the one. So we all have to take to this one. The Lord doesn't say that about every other process. The Lord doesn't say that about every other process, that this is the path, And so, you've got atheists that are inimical and don't believe in the Lord. And then you've got agnostic who at least say, I'm not sure, I don't know, which is so much better than the atheistic conception to say, no, it is not possible. Because what are they saying themselves? They're saying that they understand everything about the universe. To say that there's no powerful entity that's controlling the weather or that knows everyone's mind, how puffed up must they be to say that they know the universe so well that it's not possible? That's definitely not a humble position, and we know that they don't know everything about the world. So if they don't know everything about the universe, how can they speak confidently about anything like that? So he's summing up the whole chapter here. In other words, in this chapter, it is decided that through good association, one develops attachment for pure devotional service and thereby accepts a bona fide spiritual master, and from him begins to hear and chant and observe the regular principles of devotional service with faith, attachment, and devotion, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te ganam ganinas tatpadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So we do need a guru for that connection to the parampara, the connection to the eternal knowledge and the guidance that guru gives. Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. The impersonal conception of the supreme absolute truth, as described in this chapter, is recommended only up to the time one surrenders himself for self-realization. In other words, as long as one does not have the chance to associate with a pure devotee, the impersonal conception may be beneficial. In the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, one works without fruitive result, meditates and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. Fortunately, if one develops directly a desire to engage in Krishna consciousness and pure devotional service, he does not need to undergo step-by-step improvements in spiritual realization. Devotional service, as described in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, is more congenial. One need not bother about materials to keep body and soul together, because by the grace of the Lord, everything is carried out automatically. Everything is carried out so nicely. All the elephants are getting their food stuff, tons and tons of it. Everything seems to be working as if a watch, so well timed, like a perfectly timed watch, like how hundreds of years ago they actually could predict this solar eclipse because it's running like a watch. It's predictable like that. There's so much wonderful knowledge in the Srimad Bhagavatam about the nature of the world. And if we understand a little bit about the nature of the world, that we all of a sudden can realize, like, we're not just a little rock out in space, just random rock out in space. That's what they told us from times we were young kids. Yeah, it's just random. You're just a rock out in space. Just live for the day. Just please your senses, because that's all you got. And you get one chance. So just enjoy the heck out of it and just do whatever you want. That's what we were told pretty much our whole lives. And it didn't really resonate. We knew there was something more to life. And with this Bhagavad Gita as it is, we found the instruction manual. We found so much detailed knowledge. So that's the end of the 12th chapter. Chapter 13, nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. Text 1 through 2, translation. Arjuna said, "Oh, my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the end of knowledge." The blessed Lord then said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." Purport. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, or nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, Kshetra, the field, Kshetrajna, its knower, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all these, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. The body is this field of activity for the conditioned soul. Just kind of like how when you're a child, you might get a sandbox, and that's kind of your field of activity. And when you're in the sandbox, you're safe, and you play with your toys, and you can do everything you want in the sandbox. That's your field of activity. So this body is kind of our field of activity. It's where these activities, it allows these activities to take place. It's the thing that allows us to have the activity. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification. And according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body or field of activity. Therefore, the body is called Kshetra, or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Now, the person who does not identify himself with the body is called Kshetrajna, the knower of the field. It is not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the body. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age, he undergoes so many changes of body and yet is still one person remaining. Because when you observe your hand, what is it that's observing your hand? And when you observe your mind, what is it that's observing your mind? And even observing your intelligence, what is it that's above all those things? It's the soul. It is described in the beginning, Dehe Shmin, that the living entity is within the body and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth and from youth to old age. And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. They say every 7 years, all of the cells are completely replaced. So the body is changing all the time. The body is constantly changing. But it's kind of like a car. You know, your car, it's constantly, it's not going to go infinitely. It's got a certain amount of miles, and then you're probably going to trade it in or buy a new one. But you, the driver, through all these cars that you've ever had, you, the driver, still the same. So the cars change, but the driver, its consciousness is staying the same. The owner is distinctly Kshetrajna. Sometimes we understand that I am happy, I am mad, I am woman, I am dog, I am a cat. These are the knowers. Knower is different from the field. Although we use many articles, our clothes, etc., we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. In the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle 6 chapters of the Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the Supersoul in regard to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness, they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities, as the distressed, those in want of money, the inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes into contact with material nature, how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This also is explained. So when he says the superior position and the subordinate position of the individual are definitely defined. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness, they're suffering. So the living entities need to learn. We're here because we need to learn how to surrender. And if we don't learn that, we're going to suffer. We have to surrender to Krishna, all-powerful Krishna. That act of surrender is an act of humility that is a good step in the right direction. If we go through our whole life thinking, I don't need to surrender to anybody, we didn't learn our lesson, and we're still going to have to surrender to death, to time, to nature, Adi Atmika, Adi Daivika, Adi Bodhika, these types of miseries that come up. So we have to learn how to surrender. So one of the first things we learn when we start coming to the temple is how to bow down. And there's people that have never, most people in this world have probably never, touched their head to the ground, maybe, or to the Lord. And the Lord notices that. The Lord sees all. So he knows our consciousness. He knows where our consciousness is at. He knows where our heart is at. So a sincere soul says, Krishna, I surrender to you. I'm not the center. I want to learn how to serve, and I want to grow spiritually. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to keep going through the hamster wheel. I don't want to keep going in circles. I want out. I want out of that samsara. I want out of this cycle. So please, if it's in your plan, please show me how. Please let me be just your instrument. Let me just be a hammer and just use me like a tool, as you see fit. Um, and I had a couple of things. I wanted to kind of focus on one word, maybe a word of the day, um, that we could go into and just read a few verses. Um, so I just want to take the word of the day as durlaba. I got a few. So there's also sudurlabaha, but it means very difficult to obtain. So I won't go too much into detail about where these verses come from. If it's either Chaitanya Charitamrita or Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, but here's a verse. Devotional perfection is very difficult to attain for two reasons. First, unless one is attached to Krishna, he cannot attain devotional perfection, even if he renders devotional service for a long time. Second, Krishna does not easily deliver perfection in devotional service. So we have to be attached to Krishna to get closer to attaining devotional perfection. Because one can render devotional service for a long time, but if we're not completely attached to Krishna, we won't get that real devotional nectar. Here's how do you scroll? Here's the next one. That was from these two are both from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Durlaba, almost unattainable. The dust of your lotus feet is not attainable even by Lord Brahma, yet your lotus feet have touched my wretched body. So here we hear that, was that Shiva Ram Sena? And so even Lord Brahma, the 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 first created being, the architect of this world, the designer of this world, and the oldest, the oldest material soul, he's still he still doesn't have, not always attainable, Krishna's lotus feet, even by Lord Brahma. And then here's something, okay, we'll go to the next one. Durlaba. Very difficult to perceive. Srila Prabhupada defines it here in the CC. The transcendental mellows generated from the dealings between the gopis and Krishna cannot be tasted by fruitive activity, yogic austerity, speculative knowledge, regulative devotional service, mantra yoga, or meditation. This sweetness can be tasted only through the spontaneous love of liberated persons who chant the holy names with great ecstatic love. So spontaneous, it means it's not always planned, How are we when we're surprised? Are we acting in devotion even when we're surprised by something we don't necessarily, that doesn't hit us right, kind of rubs us the wrong way? Here's one from Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto. This is an interesting one. Durlaba, where is it? Difficult to attain. Maharaj Yudhishthira inquired, "It is very wonderful that the demon Shishupal merged into the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though extremely envious. This Sayuja Mukti is impossible to attain even for great transcendentalists. How then did the enemy of the Lord attain it?" Next, we have this is a nice one. Quote from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Durlabha, difficult to obtain. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, "This nectar from Krishna's lips is supremely difficult to obtain, but if one gets some, his life becomes successful." And Durlabha, very rare. This is from CC. I then began to consider that Vrindavan is a very solitary place. It is invincible and very difficult to attain. I therefore decided to go there alone, or at the most, take only one person with me. Durlabha, difficult to obtain. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, these are remnants of food that Krishna has eaten and thus turned to nectar with his lips. It surpasses heavenly nectar, and even such demigods as Lord Brahma find it difficult to obtain. So even the prasadam that we take, we have to remember this is nectar from Krishna's lips, and it surpasses heavenly nectar. So so it's not so easy, but it takes time, and if we have a great teacher, instead of climbing all the steps, we can take the elevator, and we can go very fast. And by chanting our rounds, it's you're associating directly with Krishna, and Krishna is dancing on your tongue, and it's the most powerful mantra, most powerful words. And we have to be thankful that this mantra has been revealed to us, and that somehow or other we found this wonderful knowledge and these wonderful teachings, and we get to see the beautiful deities and see the garlands and associate with the devotees, and take the wonderful prasad and go out on Harinam and go to Arti, and so many wonderful things that we've gotten to taste. And don't we want to share these tastes with other people? Sometimes hard, sometimes easy, but by getting people to hear the mantra and giving them a little bit of what's in your heart. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or corrections tonight? Someone? Rishi Kumar Prabhu?
I was wondering if the name Durlabha was in the Vishnu Sahasranam, because the way you were presenting it was just reminding me of that. And I found that it is. Oh, it just disappeared. 1 second. So this is in the Vishnu Sahasranam with the commentary by Sri Valadev Vidyabhushana, and Kushakrata Prabhu translates it. So in text 96, the name Durlabha comes up. He is attained only by the most difficult to practice pure devotional service, Durlabha. And Srila Baladev Vidyabhushana gives this explanation of it. The following description of the name Durlabha is found in the Smriti Shastra. I'll skip the Sanskrit. Here's the translation. After performing severe austerities, giving abundant charity, and engaging in constant meditation for thousands of births, a living entity may become free from sinful reactions and eligible to attain pure devotional service to Lord Krishna.
Jai. Thank you very much for that. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. Hare Krishna,